The world that existed before the assassination of Julius Caesar was shaped by a Roman republic that had grown powerful yet deeply unstable. A system that still celebrated ancient traditions, even as its political foundations weakened under decades of rivalry, corruption, and civil conflict. And in this environment, Rome moved with a slow and heavy tension, as though the city itself sensed that its long-standing balance between the Senate, the people, and ambitious generals had begun to dissolve. The Republic's institutions, once designed to prevent the concentration of power, now struggled to restrain the influence of charismatic leaders who rose on tides of military success and public admiration. And among these figures, Caesar became the most astonishing example. Admired for his victories in Gaul and respected for his strategic brilliance, yet feared by senators who believed that the boundaries protecting their political authority were being quietly pushed aside. The city's forums, temples, and senate houses seemed to echo with an unspoken awareness that Rome was drifting toward a transformation it could not fully understand. And despite the ordinary rhythms of life, markets opening at dawn, magistrates issuing rulings, and citizens discussing news across crowded streets, there remained a subtle tension in the air, a feeling that the Republic's traditions were no longer strong enough to contain the ambitions of its most successful general. Caesar's return to Rome after the Civil War reinforced this impression, for he entered the city as a victorious leader who had defeated Pompey, pardoned former enemies, reorganized the state, and introduced reforms meant to stabilize a nation exhausted by years of political division. And although many citizens welcomed these efforts, a growing number of senators viewed them with deep suspicion, interpreting each decision as a step toward authority that no single Roman should possess. His honors, titles, and public celebrations intensified these concerns, especially because the Roman identity was built upon the rejection of monarchy, and even the slightest suggestion that one man could stand above the Senate violated the cultural memory of the Republic's founding, a memory preserved through countless stories, speeches, and rituals. While the common people admired Caesar for his generosity and vision, many senators felt increasingly overshadowed, believing that their influence, inherited from generations of political ancestors, was slowly being diminished by a leader whose power depended on popular support rather than senatorial approval. This conflict created a silent, emotional divide within the city, admiration among the masses, anxiety within the Senate, and a deepening uncertainty about what future Rome was approaching. Caesar himself appeared calm in the midst of these tensions, moving through public events with confidence and focusing on reforms that he believed would strengthen the Republic. Yet his lack of concern for the Senate's unease made his opponents feel even more threatened, for they feared that his confidence indicated a desire to reshape the political structure in ways that could erase their authority entirely. As Rome entered the year 44 BCE, this mixture of public admiration and elite fear created an atmosphere heavy with anticipation. And although few citizens could have predicted the exact outcome, many sensed that the Republic was standing on the threshold of irreversible change. Inside senatorial gatherings, conversations grew quieter and more anxious, and men who had once competed with one another for influence now found themselves united by a shared belief that the Republic's survival required action against Caesar's unprecedented dominance, even if that action carried grave moral and political consequences. These concerns did not erupt in open conflict, but they persisted beneath the surface, shaping whispered debates and private alliances, while the city around them continued its daily life, unaware that history was moving steadily toward a moment that would shock the world. In this fragile political climate, the idea of assassination did not emerge suddenly. Rather, it developed slowly as the logical conclusion for men who convinced themselves that extreme measures were necessary to prevent a single leader from absorbing the powers that had always belonged collectively to the Roman government. By the time the Ides of March approached, Rome had become a place where calm streets and ceremonial proceedings concealed the quiet urgency felt by senators who believed that their republic was fading. And in this blend of fear, admiration, ambition, and uncertainty, the stage was set for the event that would become one of the most defining moments in Western history. The rise of Julius Caesar unfolded during a period when the Roman Republic was struggling to hold together, a political system that had grown far more complex than anything its founders had imagined. And his steady ascent revealed not only his personal brilliance, but also the weaknesses that had seeped into Rome's institutions over generations of conflict, expansion, and ambition. As a young politician, Caesar cultivated alliances with precision, understanding that Rome's political world operated through networks of loyalty, favors, and public image, and he quickly mastered the art of presenting himself as a champion of the people while maintaining strong connections with influential figures in the Senate. His decision to join forces with Pompey and Crassus in the first triumvirate for this informal alliance allowed him to gain the consulship and later secure the governorship of Gaul, a position that gave him both authority and the opportunity to command armies far from Rome. His campaigns in Gaul transformed him from a promising politician into a legendary figure, for he achieved victories that expanded Rome's borders, brought vast wealth into the state, and earned the admiration of his soldiers, who followed him with extraordinary loyalty. Meanwhile, the Senate watched these developments with increasing concern, aware that a general who controlled seasoned legions and possessed a growing reputation could become a political force capable of reshaping the entire republic. Caesar's reports, speeches, and writings spread his fame even further, and as the years passed, he gained a status that blurred the line between celebrated general and potential political threat. The balance of the triumvirate weakened after Crassus died and Pompey drifted toward the Senate, leaving Caesar in a vulnerable position. For his enemies viewed him as a man whose influence had grown too great to fit within the traditional limits of republican authority. When the Senate demanded that he surrender his command and return to Rome as a private citizen, Caesar interpreted this as a deliberate attempt to strip him of protection and destroy his career. And in this moment, the fragile structure of the Republic failed to offer a peaceful solution. His decision to cross the Rubicon became the symbolic beginning of a civil war that exposed the deep fractures within Rome's political order. And although the conflict ended in Caesar's decisive victory, it left the Republic weakened and exhausted, its institutions hollowed by years of internal hostility. Upon returning to Rome as the undisputed leader, Caesar attempted to rebuild the state, introducing reforms involving debt relief, calendar organization, provincial administration, and the expansion of the Senate. Yet these reforms only intensified the suspicion that he was centralizing power under the guise of stability. His acceptance of honors, titles, and the role of dictator for life deepened the anxiety within the senatorial class, who believed that Rome was moving closer to a system dominated by one individual rather than governed by collective authority. The people celebrated him with enthusiasm, grateful for the order he restored. But the Senate viewed this public devotion as a dangerous shift in political loyalty, for the Republic had never been intended to function around a single figure who stood above all others. As Caesar continued to expand his influence, the gap between his intentions and the Senate's fears grew wider, and Rome found itself caught between admiration for a leader who brought stability and dread of a man whose power could reshape the foundation of its political identity. In this environment, whispers of conspiracy began to form among senators who believed that their duty to protect the Republic demanded action against Caesar. And although no clear plan had yet emerged, the idea that his death might be the only way to preserve the old system slowly gained strength. Thus, long before the Ides of March arrived, the Republic had already entered a quiet crisis, shaped not only by Caesar's rise, but by the deep structural weaknesses that made such a rise possible, leaving Rome suspended between gratitude and fear, reform and tradition, order and the threat of absolute power. And in this fragile space, the conspiracy that would soon claim Caesar's life began to take shape. As Julius Caesar's power reached its zenith, the atmosphere within the Roman Senate grew increasingly tense, and what had begun as cautious concern gradually evolved into open anxiety. 4 senators could not ignore the reality that a single individual now commanded loyalty, armies, and public admiration on a scale that the Republic had never experienced. And this concentration of influence challenged not only their political authority, but also their very understanding of Roman liberty, a principle that had been central to the identity of the state for centuries. In private meetings and whispered conversations, men debated how to respond to a leader whose successes could not be denied, yet whose intentions were scrutinized for every subtle gesture, title, or reform. And although Caesar showed no immediate desire to eliminate opponents through violence, the mere possibility of his unchecked authority created a pervasive fear that the Republic might be replaced by a monarchy under his control. Senators like Brutus, Cassius, and others wrestled with conflicting emotions, recognizing Caesar's extraordinary achievements while simultaneously fearing the precedent he represented. For they had been raised on stories of kings expelled from Rome, taught that absolute power in the hands of a single man led inevitably to tyranny. And now they faced the moral and political dilemma of determining whether preventing such tyranny justified extraordinary action. The city itself, meanwhile, reflected a society divided. The populace admired Caesar's generosity, celebrated his triumphs, and trusted him to provide stability after years of civil strife. Yet this popular devotion only intensified the senators' concern, highlighting the widening gap between public opinion and the aristocratic elite. Political maneuvering became a subtle war of gestures, favors granted, honors accepted, speeches delivered with careful wording. and public appearances calibrated to reinforce loyalty without provoking overt rebellion. And each of these actions was interpreted through the lens of suspicion by those determined to safeguard the Republic. As days passed, the conspirators observed Caesar's routines, noting the rhythms of his life, the positions of his guards, and the ceremonies that granted him honor, while secretly recruiting allies among the Senate and influential citizens who shared their anxiety, creating a network of trust shadowed by fear. The psychological tension was palpable, for every action could signal compromise, betrayal, or opportunity. And as the Ides of March drew nearer, the Senate's chambers became a crucible of debate, persuasion, and moral deliberation, where ancient principles of liberty clashed with the pressing reality of an individual whose ambitions threatened centuries of tradition. Even within this group, disagreements arose. Some argued for subtle political restraint, others for direct confrontation, yet all shared the understanding that Caesar's death, while extreme, might be necessary to preserve a system that had endured countless challenges, but now faced the unprecedented concentration of power embodied in a single figure. In this intricate balance of fear, admiration, and calculation, Rome was a city poised between continuation and transformation, and the plot against Caesar matured slowly, nurtured by decades of political tension, public adoration, and the inexorable pressures of historical circumstance, leaving the Republic's fate uncertain and its citizens unaware that within weeks, the Ides of March would mark a moment that would echo across history, reshaping the political landscape forever. As the Ides of March approached in 44 BCE, the city of Rome moved with a deceptive calm, a quiet tension lingering beneath the bustling markets, crowded forums, and ceremonial processions. For everyone sensed, even if they could not articulate it, that something monumental was imminent. And while the ordinary citizens continued their daily routines, the senators who feared for the Republic's survival prepared for what they believed would be a decisive moment in history, meticulously planning and coordinating their actions to prevent a single man from consolidating the authority that had always been distributed among the Senate and magistrates. In the weeks leading up to the fateful day, Caesar maintained his usual schedule of public appearances, audiences with dignitaries, and inspections of the city. His demeanor calm and confident, perhaps unaware that a conspiracy was forming right under his eyes, or perhaps choosing to ignore the subtle signs of dissent, while his supporters continued to celebrate his reforms, military triumphs, and generosity, further heightening the contrast between public adoration and elite fear. The conspirators, including Brutus, Cassius, and other key senators, held secret meetings to coordinate their plan, discussing the logistics, timing, and moral justification for an act that would violate every norm of loyalty and friendship. Yet they convinced themselves that the preservation of the Republic required extraordinary measures, for they could not imagine a Rome in which one man held unchecked authority, and they feared that any delay might render their efforts futile, allowing Caesar to solidify his position beyond challenge. Each senator involved wrestled privately with the gravity of their decision, balancing personal loyalty, honor, and fear of divine or historical judgment, while the city's streets reflected the ordinary rhythms of life, with merchants selling goods, children playing, and citizens debating politics in open-air forums, unaware that the course of history was about to pivot dramatically. On that morning, Caesar prepared to attend the Senate, as he always did, his entourage moving with disciplined precision, unaware of the gathering danger within the Curia. And as he entered the Senate building, the conspirators positioned themselves strategically, blending loyalty and concealment, ready to execute a plan that they believed would preserve Rome's freedom. Yet, no matter how meticulously they prepared, the tension of the moment was palpable, stretching across the chambers, through the corridors of power, and into the very hearts of those who had devoted their lives to defending the Republic. In this delicate balance of anticipation, fear, and moral reasoning, Rome seemed to hold its breath, caught between the extraordinary power of one man and the collective resolve of those determined to prevent a collapse of centuries of tradition. And the stage was set for an act whose consequences would resonate far beyond the marble walls of the Senate, altering the course of history in ways that none of those present could fully comprehend, marking a turning point where ambition, loyalty, fear, and principle collided, irreversible moment. In the tense days leading up to the Ides of March, Rome moved with a deceptive calm, as though the city itself was holding its breath, while the conspirators prepared in secrecy for an act that would forever alter the course of history. And every movement, conversation, and observation became a part of a delicate and dangerous plan, for Brutus, Cassius, and their fellow senators understood that the preservation of the Republic depended on the precision of their timing, the discretion of their arrangements, and the unity of their purpose. And yet each man wrestled privately with the moral weight of the decision, recognizing that loyalty to a friend and mentor was in direct conflict with what they considered their civic duty. While the memory of Rome's expulsion of kings and centuries-long struggle against tyranny fueled a conviction that extreme measures might be the only path to safeguard centuries of tradition. In shadowed rooms, behind closed doors, the conspirators discussed every detail: Caesar's routine, the placement of guards, the layout of the Senate, the positions of allies and potential obstacles, and even the sequence in which they would strike, rehearsing in their minds the precise choreography necessary to carry out the act successfully without alerting those not involved. And every word exchanged carried a dual meaning, serving both as practical instruction and as psychological reinforcement, a way to steel themselves against fear and doubt while reminding each other of the stakes that lay ahead. Brutus, in particular, faced an internal struggle that weighed heavily upon him, for he admired Caesar's brilliance, charisma, and achievements. Yet he feared the erosion of the Republic's principles under a single man's dominance. And he reflected on the moral paradox of murder in service to freedom, understanding that history might judge him harshly even if future generations praised his choice. And this thought, like a shadow, followed him through each day, intertwining with every observation and conversation in a complex web of anticipation, anxiety, and moral calculation. The other conspirators, including Cassius, Decimus, and several lesser-known senators, provided reinforcement, reminding Brutus and one another that the Republic's survival required decisive action, and they encouraged each other to suppress hesitation, to focus on the necessity of their mission, and to maintain outward appearances of loyalty and normalcy in all public encounters. for any suspicion could undermine their careful preparations and jeopardize the plan. Meanwhile, Caesar continued his routines with his usual poise, meeting citizens, attending ceremonies, and giving audiences to dignitaries. His confidence and calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the conspirators' growing tension, and his habitual gestures, accepting honors, inspecting the Senate's chambers, and interacting warmly with allies were interpreted as evidence both of his unawareness and of the necessity for immediate action, as the conspirators believed that any delay could allow him to consolidate his influence even further, reducing their chances of success. In these hours, the city itself seemed a silent witness to history, with bustling markets, children playing in the streets, merchants calling their wares, and citizens going about their daily lives. Yet the air was charged with a subtle unease, a tension imperceptible to the untrained eye but sensed by those attuned to the undercurrents of power. And every stone of the forum, every marble column, and every corner of the curia seemed poised to bear witness to the monumental event about to unfold. The conspirators' preparations were methodical. They assigned positions, rehearsed speeches they might deliver in the aftermath, coordinated signals, and mentally envisioned every contingency. From Caesar, noticing a hesitation to an unexpected ally intervening, to the physical logistics of restraining the guards, and each member trained himself to act without hesitation, for they knew that a moment of doubt could collapse the entire plan. They also debated subtle nuances of persuasion, deciding how to justify their actions to the Senate, the citizens, and the gods, blending philosophy with practical necessity, often invoking the ideals of Roman liberty, civic virtue, and historical precedent, reminding themselves that their cause, though morally complex, had historical justification. And this self-reassurance became essential to sustaining courage amid fear and uncertainty. While the conspirators strategized, the city's rhythm continued almost obliviously. Merchants called out their wares, children laughed in alleys, and citizens discussed daily affairs. Yet these ordinary noises contrasted sharply with the extraordinary focus occurring within the minds of the men plotting Caesar's demise, creating a surreal juxtaposition of mundane life and monumental historical preparation. A contrast that would define the morning of the Ides of March as an event simultaneously ordinary and epic-defining. In every gesture, every decision, every whispered consultation, the conspirators felt the pressure of centuries of Roman history pressing upon them, aware that the Republic's institutions had survived civil wars, popular uprisings, and ambitious generals before. Yet none had concentrated such power in one individual with the combination of personal charisma, military genius, and popular support that Caesar now commanded. And this unprecedented concentration of influence made their task feel urgent, morally justified, and terrifyingly final. The morning of the Ides of March dawned over Rome with an eerie stillness, as though the city itself had sensed the monumental events about to unfold. And while the streets teemed with citizens going about their everyday business, merchants arranging their stalls, children playing in the alleyways, and priests performing routine religious duties, the Senate, a space of marble columns and inscriptions echoing centuries of tradition, became the stage for a conspiracy that had been meticulously planned over weeks of secret meetings. whispered strategies, and moral deliberation. And within this chamber, Brutus, Cassius, and the other conspirators took their positions, each man acutely aware of his proximity to history and of the irreversible nature of the act they were about to commit. Caesar arrived with his usual confidence, accompanied by trusted attendants and a small contingent of guards, moving with a composed demeanor that concealed no sign of the danger lurking within the marble walls. And as he entered, the conspirators exchanged subtle glances, signaling readiness while maintaining an appearance of casual interaction. For any hesitation or visible nervousness could alert the man they intended to strike, potentially compromising everything for which they had prepared so painstakingly. The tension in the chamber was palpable, stretching through the senators' rows, seeping into the air like an invisible current, while each conspirator silently recited in his mind the philosophical justifications, the historical precedents, and the moral rationalizations that had carried them to this moment, knowing that once the first motion was made, nothing could be undone. Caesar, moving past the conspirators, engaged in brief greetings, unaware that the hands he shook and the smiles he returned were those of men who had, over weeks and months, rehearsed every detail of their fatal plan. And the juxtaposition of ordinary civility and impending violence created a surreal, almost dreamlike tension, as though time itself had slowed to accommodate the gravity of what was about to occur. The conspirators struck with swift coordination, each movement deliberate, each action rehearsed, as Caesar's initial surprise froze him only for a heartbeat before he realized the full weight of betrayal. And the chamber, usually a place of debate, deliberation, and rhetoric, became a stage for history's most infamous act of political violence, echoing with shouts, struggle, and the clash of ambition and principle. In those moments, the moral complexity of the act became vividly tangible. Brutus' hesitation, his internal struggle between loyalty to a friend and duty to the Republic, contrasted with Cassius' urgency and resolve, highlighting the profound tension between personal sentiment and public duty that defined the conspirators' motivations. And yet, amid the chaos, there was a precision, a grim choreography that reflected the meticulous preparation and philosophical reasoning underpinning the assassination. For the men believed that their decisive action would preserve the Republic and prevent Rome from sliding irrevocably into monarchy, tyranny, or dictatorship. And in that belief lay both courage and terror. Outside the chamber, the city continued its rhythm unaware, and the juxtaposition of normal life with historical catastrophe created a surreal, almost cinematic contrast. For while citizens observed ordinary events, children laughing, merchants calling out wares, chariots rattling over stone streets, the very fate of Rome was being reshaped inside the Senate, a fate that would reverberate through the Republic, across continents, and into the annals of world history. As Caesar fell, the conspirators confronted not only the immediate practicalities controlling the scene, restraining loyalists, addressing chaos, but also the psychological consequences of their decision, the weight of moral responsibility, and the fear of public backlash. And in these moments, the full complexity of political assassination became apparent, as every action, every gesture, and every breath carried the potential to redefine the structure of power in Rome, to inspire loyalty or revolt, and to establish the narrative that would be told by generations to come. The city, the Republic, and the world beyond held its breath, and in that silence, broken only by the distant sounds of daily life, the consequences of ambition, fear, and the pursuit of liberty intersected with historical inevitability, creating a moment that was at once ordinary and extraordinary, planned and chaotic, morally ambiguous and historically decisive, marking the Ides of March as an event whose significance would echo through centuries, teaching lessons about power, loyalty, fear, and the precarious balance between human ambition and the institutions designed to contain it. The moment Caesar fell in the Senate, Rome entered a period of profound shock and uncertainty, and the city that had once celebrated his victories, adored his reforms, and trusted his leadership, now grappled with disbelief, fear, and confusion for the assassination, though meticulously planned by the conspirators, created a vacuum of power, a sudden rupture in the fabric of the Republic that no individual or institution was prepared to fill. And while Brutus, Cassius, and their fellow senators justified their act as a necessary defense of liberty, they could not escape the immediate consequences of what they had wrought. For the reaction of the populace, the soldiers, and the broader political machinery was unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. Citizens who had adored Caesar were paralyzed by grief and outrage, gathering in forums, streets, and temples to discuss the shocking event, while rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by both fear and fascination, each citizen interpreting the assassination through their own lens of loyalty, ideology, and personal experience. And in this swirl of emotion, the conspirators found themselves confronting not only the practical challenges of consolidating authority in Caesar's absence, but also the moral reality that their act, though rationalized as protection of the Republic, had introduced chaos into a city already teetering on the edge of instability. The Senate itself became a scene of tense deliberation, where supporters of the conspirators attempted to justify the assassination, arguing that the removal of a single man who had accumulated extraordinary power was essential to preserving centuries of Republican tradition, while others, unsure of where loyalty or survival lay, vacillated between support, fear, and opportunism. And this uncertainty magnified the political fragmentation of Rome, revealing the fragility of institutions that had long depended upon shared norms, mutual respect, and the careful balancing of power. Meanwhile, Caesar's loyalists, military officers, provincial governors, and influential allies were forced to interpret the meaning of the assassination quickly, assessing whether to enforce loyalty to the ideals of the Republic, avenge their fallen leader, or pursue personal advantage. And the fluidity of allegiance created a tense environment, rebellion, or further destabilization, and the fear that Rome might plunge into civil war grew palpable. For the assassination, though intended to protect the Republic, had shattered the equilibrium upon which centuries of governance had depended. Brutus, Cassius, and the others grappled with their own expectations versus reality, for they had imagined that Caesar's removal would restore balance and affirm the primacy of the Senate. Yet they were immediately confronted with the unpredictability of human emotion, the volatile nature of popular opinion, and the potential for military intervention by generals still loyal to Caesar. And in these moments, the philosophical arguments they had rehearsed concerning liberty, justice, and civic duty met the stark practical consequences of violence, uncertainty, and human unpredictability, leaving the conspirators to navigate a landscape far more complex than they had anticipated. The city itself reflected this tension. Streets that had once been vibrant with commerce and civic activity became venues for political discussion, spontaneous gatherings, and whispered speculation, while temples and forums echoed with prayers, debates, and expressions of grief, all highlighting the extraordinary impact of a single act upon the daily life of millions. And the psychological weight of collective trauma compounded the political consequences as citizens struggled to reconcile their love, fear, or resentment of Caesar with the reality of his sudden absence. In the midst of this upheaval, the balance of power shifted rapidly. As military commanders in Rome and the provinces assessed the assassination's implications, considering whether to support the conspirators, assert their own authority, or position themselves strategically for what they anticipated would be a prolonged period of instability, and the careful choreography of loyalty, fear, and ambition began to dictate actions across the Republic, transforming ordinary citizens, senators, and generals alike into actors on a stage whose outcome was far from certain. Throughout this period, the conspirators' intentions to protect the Republic, preserve liberty, and prevent dictatorship were constantly tested against the harsh realities of human behavior, the momentum of public opinion, and the sheer unpredictability of political and military forces, revealing that the act of assassination, while precise in its execution, could not control the vast and dynamic system into which it had been introduced, and that the consequences of such an act would unfold across months and years, shaping Rome in ways that no single man or group could fully anticipate. Following the assassination of Julius Caesar, Rome plunged into an unprecedented state of political uncertainty, where the city's streets, forums, and temples reflected both public grief and mounting unrest, as citizens struggled to comprehend the sudden removal of a leader who had commanded not only extraordinary political authority, but also immense personal loyalty. And this duality of admiration and fear created a volatile environment in which rumors, speculations, and emotional reactions spread quickly, shaping perception and influencing behavior across every stratum of society. The common people, who had long benefited from Caesar's policies, celebrated his generosity, admired his military conquests, and trusted his reforms to provide stability after years of civil unrest, now felt a mixture of shock, anger, and confusion, unsure whether to mourn, protest, or wait for the unfolding of events, while the Senate, though some of its members had participated in the assassination, faced the delicate task of asserting authority without igniting civil unrest, carefully balancing moral justification with political necessity, and attempting to persuade citizens that their actions were in defense of liberty, even as public opinion threatened to destabilize the carefully constructed narrative. Brutus and Cassius, having anticipated immediate acclaim for defending the Republic, were confronted instead with the chaotic reality of human emotion, discovering that fear, grief, and loyalty to Caesar created unpredictable waves of reaction, forcing them to consider how to consolidate influence, calm the populace, and prevent rival generals or opportunistic politicians from exploiting the situation. And they realized that the act of assassination, though executed with precision, had introduced variables far beyond their control, revealing the limits of planning in the context of a living, dynamic society. Meanwhile, Caesar's supporters, including loyal generals, provincial governors, and influential allies, reacted swiftly, assessing the assassination's implications and contemplating possible retaliation. While the populace looked to these figures for leadership, guidance, and protection, creating an environment in which political allegiance could shift suddenly, and where every rumor, public speech, and military movement had the potential to trigger rebellion, civil conflict, or realignment of power. The psychological weight of the assassination extended beyond immediate politics, for it introduced a moral and social uncertainty that permeated the city, as ordinary citizens questioned the legitimacy of killing a leader, the boundaries of loyalty and virtue, and the extent to which principles of the Republic justified extreme action. And this ethical contemplation coexisted with fear of disorder, personal harm, and political retribution, resulting in a city psychologically suspended between mourning, anger, and apprehension. Within the Senate, debates grew increasingly tense, with some conspirators defending their actions as necessary to prevent tyranny, while others feared that the absence of Caesar's unifying authority would lead to fragmentation, rivalry, and power struggles that could plunge Rome into civil war. And this tension highlighted the fragility of institutional structures that, while historically resilient, were now tested by a combination of sudden leadership vacuum, public unrest, and military loyalty that could no longer be predicted or fully controlled. Communication became a crucial element of survival and influence. As messages were sent to provinces, allies were persuaded to remain loyal, and speeches were delivered to justify actions and manage perception, all while each conspirator navigated personal guilt, public scrutiny, and the looming possibility of retaliation for the moral weight of their act, combined with the practical demands of political management to create an almost unbearable cognitive and emotional load, a burden that required both intellectual rigor and psychological resilience. As the days unfolded, the streets of Rome alternated between moments of calm and surges of agitation, reflecting the complex interplay between ordinary life and extraordinary political upheaval. While social gatherings, market interactions, and religious ceremonies became arenas for discussion, speculation, and subtle persuasion, and every citizen, whether aware or not, participated in shaping the outcome of the power struggle, which now extended far beyond the Senate chamber, enveloping every corner of the Republic. The aftermath of Caesar's death also exposed deep divisions within the military, as legions loyal to Caesar's memory considered how to respond. Provincial commanders weighed the risks of rebellion or support, and political opportunists prepared to assert influence, all of which highlighted that the conspirators' moral justification did not equate to practical security, and that the Republic, already fragile, now faced multiple competing centers of power that could either stabilize or further destabilize the state, depending on how quickly and effectively leaders could act. Within this turbulent environment, the human dimension of fear, loyalty, and ambition became inseparable from institutional fragility, as the assassination, intended to preserve liberty, inadvertently amplified uncertainty, chaos, and tension. demonstrating that even acts executed with philosophical and moral deliberation could unleash forces beyond the control of their planners, and that history often unfolds in ways unanticipated by those who believe themselves architects of fate. In the immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination, the Roman Republic teetered on the edge of chaos as the city's political, social, and military structures struggled to absorb the shock of a sudden power vacuum. And while the conspirators believed that the removal of a single man would restore the Republic to its rightful balance, they quickly discovered that human ambition, loyalty, and fear were forces far more complex and unpredictable than any philosophical justification could contain. Senators who had participated in the conspiracy wrestled with public perception, uncertain whether citizens would honor their claim of defending liberty or denounce them as murderers. And each conversation, each appearance in the Senate, carried the weight of both immediate political calculation and long-term historical consequence. For the act that was intended to protect the Republic now risked igniting civil conflict, rebellion, or the rise of new, potentially more dangerous leaders. Meanwhile, the common people, who had long admired Caesar for his generosity, victories, and reforms, were thrown into a state of grief, confusion, and anger, filling forums, streets, and temples with heated debates, spontaneous gatherings, and expressions of collective emotion. And this public reaction introduced a new variable that the conspirators had not fully accounted for, namely the unpredictable power of popular sentiment in shaping political outcomes. For the love, loyalty, and outrage of the masses could drive events as forcefully as any army or law. Military leaders across the Republic, from legions stationed in Rome to provincial commanders in distant territories, immediately assessed the political situation, weighing loyalty to Caesar, allegiance to the conspirators, and personal ambition, and the delicate balance of command and obedience, combined with the sudden removal of the central figure of authority, created a highly volatile environment where a single misstep, misunderstanding, or decision could trigger conflict, mutiny, or the fragmentation of command, threatening to destabilize the Republic even further. The conspirators, despite their careful planning, confronted the profound reality that philosophy and morality could not dictate the outcomes of complex human systems, and that their act of assassination, while executed with precision, had unleashed forces far beyond their control, including spontaneous public reaction, military uncertainty, and political opportunism, each compounding the instability of Rome in ways they had only partially imagined, forcing them to navigate a landscape where loyalty, fear, and ambition intersected unpredictably. Brutus, Cassius, and their allies attempted to manage public opinion through speeches, proclamations, and appeals to Roman ideals, emphasizing liberty, civic duty, and the prevention of tyranny. Yet even these carefully constructed messages were filtered through the perceptions, biases, and emotions of a population that had just witnessed the violent death of a leader. And the efficacy of persuasion was never guaranteed in a society already fractured by decades of civil unrest, shifting alliances, and personal ambition. The streets of Rome, once familiar and routine, became sites of political engagement and social expression, where every citizen, soldier, and merchant participated consciously or unconsciously in shaping the evolving narrative, discussing the morality, necessity, and consequences of the assassination. While rumors, exaggerated stories, and individual interpretations amplified the sense of uncertainty, fear, and potential conflict, creating a social atmosphere that mirrored the political turbulence at the heart of the Republic. Within the Senate, tension between conspirators and their allies manifested in debates, strategic decisions, and delicate attempts at consolidation of authority. Yet even as these men maneuvered, external pressures mounted. Military leaders considered asserting control. Provincial governors evaluated loyalty and risk, and ambitious politicians sought to capitalize on the vacuum, illustrating that even a meticulously planned political act could not contain the cascade of consequences that followed, and that the Republic, fragile as ever, relied on a delicate equilibrium of trust, fear, and restraint that had now been violently disrupted. The moral and psychological dimension of the event weighed heavily upon the conspirators. As the philosophical justification, they had relied upon defense of liberty, prevention of tyranny, historical precedent intersected with the immediate reality of public anger, social unrest, and potential military retaliation, creating an environment of intense pressure, moral ambiguity, and historical significance, where every action, decision, and word contributed to shaping the Republic's fate, and where the lessons of power, loyalty, fear, and human unpredictability were writ large in the unfolding events, demonstrating that even acts intended for the preservation of order could trigger consequences that no individual could fully anticipate or control. In the weeks following Caesar's assassination, Rome's political landscape shifted dramatically as ambitious figures sought to fill the vacuum left by his death, and among them Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally and trusted general, emerged with a combination of charisma, military authority, and political acumen that allowed him to consolidate immediate influence, commanding the loyalty of key legions and positioning himself as a protector of Caesar's legacy. While Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and a young man scarcely more than 18 years old, navigated the treacherous environment with a mixture of prudence, determination, and the careful guidance of advisors, rapidly transforming from a relative unknown into a figure whose potential to command respect, influence public sentiment, and challenge rivals became increasingly apparent. The city itself became a stage for political maneuvering and public spectacle, with citizens observing, interpreting, and reacting to speeches, parades, and declarations as though they were actors in a play whose narrative was still unfolding. And the tension between Antony's immediate, forceful approach and Octavian's strategic patience highlighted the divergent paths that ambition and opportunity could take in a time of crisis, as each sought to claim authority, shape public opinion, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation that would determine the Republic's future. Antony leveraged his position as consul and his reputation as a skilled orator to influence both the Senate and the people, balancing the dual roles of public reassurance and subtle intimidation, while Octavian carefully cultivated loyalty among veterans, allied families, and citizens who admired Caesar's memory, demonstrating that political survival required not only military might, but also nuanced understanding of social dynamics, persuasive communication, and the ability to exploit both emotion and reason in the hearts and minds of Romans. The legacy of Caesar's reforms, triumphs, and popularity played a crucial role in shaping this emerging power struggle. For Antony invoked the memory of his fallen friend to rally supporters, while Octavian, drawing upon both bloodline and promise, positioned himself as the natural heir to Caesar's vision, appealing to the ideals of stability, order, and civic pride. And the interplay between these two figures illuminated the complex interconnection of personal ambition, historical memory, and political necessity that defined Rome in the aftermath of the assassination. As both men maneuvered, the Senate attempted to assert authority, but the fragmented political landscape, combined with the widespread influence of popular opinion and the loyalty of the legions, limited its effectiveness, revealing the shifting balance between traditional republican institutions and emergent individual power, and emphasizing that the republic's future would increasingly depend on the ability of leaders to command both public support and military force, rather than merely rely on legal precedent or senatorial procedure. The streets of Rome reflected this tension, filled with citizens discussing speeches, observing processions, and interpreting gestures of power and influence, while the psychological atmosphere of the city oscillated between hope, fear, anticipation, and awe. And this collective consciousness played a decisive role in shaping the strategies, decisions, and rhetoric of both Antony and Octavian, as each sought to consolidate influence without provoking premature conflict or alienating key allies, demonstrating that political leadership in times of crisis demanded a combination of timing, subtlety, and boldness, along with an acute awareness of the unpredictable dynamics of human emotion. Military loyalty, too, became a defining factor. For Antony's legions, seasoned and loyal, provided immediate power, while Octavian's efforts to secure alliances among troops, veterans, and provincial forces revealed that the balance of force and legitimacy was inseparable from social and political persuasion, and that control over the Republic required mastery of both tangible military authority and intangible public influence, a lesson that would resonate throughout the turbulent years ahead. Throughout this period, the memory of Caesar's assassination lingered like a shadow, influencing decisions, shaping rhetoric, and informing alliances, as every citizen, soldier, and politician navigated the tension between grief, fear, loyalty, and opportunity. And the interplay of these forces created an environment where each decision could amplify stability or accelerate chaos, highlighting the fragile balance between personal ambition, historical legacy, and the structural limitations of the Republic, while simultaneously demonstrating how power could be reconstructed, redistributed, and contested in a world still reeling from the consequences of a single violent act. As the months passed following Caesar's assassination, Rome became a cauldron of political intrigue, public unrest, and military maneuvering. And the rivalry between Mark Antony and Octavian intensified into a complex struggle that would shape the fate of the Republic. For Antony, emboldened by his position as consul and his command over loyal legions, sought to assert dominance quickly, demonstrating both charisma and ruthlessness in consolidating authority, while Octavian, young, calculating, and determined, maneuvered with strategic patience, cultivating alliances with senators, military leaders, and influential citizens, understanding that timing, perception, and careful orchestration of public sentiment were as crucial as force of arms in determining supremacy. And in this intricate dance, every gesture, speech, and maneuver carried enormous political weight. The city itself reflected the tension of this struggle, as citizens observed public addresses, interpreted symbolic actions, and debated the legitimacy of authority, while rumors, misperceptions, and partisan narratives shaped the psychological atmosphere, amplifying both anxiety and fervor, and forcing both Antony and Octavian to adapt constantly to shifting conditions, public opinion, and the responses of key military and political actors, illustrating that power in Rome was inseparable from perception, loyalty, and the management of emotion as much as it was from law or formal office. Antony leveraged his immediate popularity and established relationships with Caesar's veterans to create the appearance of continuity and stability, positioning himself as the protector of Caesar's legacy. While Octavian, though younger and initially less experienced, emphasized legal legitimacy, family lineage, and appeals to republican ideals, presenting himself as a corrective force capable of balancing the excesses of Antony and the conspirators alike. And the contrast between Antony's dynamic, forceful approach and Octavian's calculated, patient strategy highlighted the multifaceted nature of power, where charisma, military strength, public persuasion, and moral authority all intersected in a volatile and contested environment. Military loyalty, particularly among the legions who had served Caesar, became a critical determinant in the struggle, for Antony's forces provided immediate leverage. Yet, Octavian's careful cultivation of alliances with troops, provincial commanders, and influential families demonstrated that loyalty was neither fixed nor purely transactional, and that strategic communication, symbolic gestures, and displays of competence could sway even the most seasoned soldiers, revealing that psychological and social influence were as vital as military might in determining the outcome of leadership disputes. Public sentiment, too, played an indispensable role, for citizens, artisans, merchants, and veterans alike became actors in the political drama. Their reactions to speeches, honors, and displays of authority influencing the calculations of both Antony and Octavian, and forcing them to negotiate the delicate balance between persuasion and coercion, reassurance and intimidation, spectacle and substance. A dynamic that would continue to define Roman politics throughout the turbulent period. The Senate, caught between competing powers, attempted to assert influence, mediate conflict, and maintain civic order. Yet, its effectiveness was constrained by factionalism, fear, and the extraordinary presence of two ambitious leaders whose personal authority often eclipsed institutional power, illustrating that, in the wake of the assassination, the Republic's traditional structures had weakened, and survival depended as much on navigating human ambition and emotion as it did on legal prerogative or formal office. And this fragile interplay of power, perception, and legitimacy created a political environment of extraordinary tension and high stakes, where every decision could tip the balance to war, stability, or further fragmentation. Antony's skill in rhetoric, his ability to read public mood, and his willingness to use both persuasion and intimidation. Yet, Octavian's patience, strategic vision, and keen sense of timing enabled him to counterbalance Antony's assertiveness, exploiting moments of miscalculation, building alliances, and cultivating loyalty among both troops and citizens, thereby transforming the struggle from a simple contest of force into a nuanced contest of strategy, perception, and influence, a multi-dimensional conflict in which military action, public persuasion, and moral authority intertwined inseparably. As the months unfolded, the memory of Caesar and the ideological justification for action continued to influence decisions, alliances, and public sentiment, reminding all participants that political legitimacy in Rome was historically and socially constructed, reliant not only on law or office, but also on the perception of moral authority, the management of memory, and the ability to project continuity or renewal. And this dynamic added layers of complexity to the power struggle. As Antony and Octavian navigated the legacies of loyalty, fear, grief, and ambition while preparing for the confrontations that would determine the Republic's future. As the rivalry between Mark Antony and Octavian intensified, the Roman Republic teetered on the brink of civil war, with political, social, and military tensions converging to create a climate of unprecedented uncertainty. And while both leaders sought to consolidate power, maintain loyalty, and control public perception, the underlying instability of the Republic itself became increasingly apparent. 4 centuries-old institutions designed to balance power among magistrates, senators, and assemblies were proving inadequate to contain the ambitions of 2 extraordinary individuals, each commanding personal loyalty, charisma, and strategic insight, and each prepared to exploit every opportunity to secure supremacy in the wake of Caesar's assassination. Antony, relying on his established reputation, eloquence, and command over veteran legions, moved decisively to assert authority, controlling key districts, influencing the Senate, and rallying Caesar's supporters to his cause, while Octavian, demonstrating a rare combination of patience, calculation, and political acumen, cultivated alliances among senators, provincial governors, and the citizenry, using both symbolic gestures and strategic messaging to expand his influence, establish legitimacy, and challenge Antony's dominance, revealing that leadership in post-assassination Rome required not only military power, but also subtle manipulation of perception, loyalty, and historical narrative. The city of Rome itself became a reflection of this escalating tension, with forums, temples, and streets filled with citizens observing speeches, interpreting gestures, and engaging in discussions that shaped public sentiment, amplifying the pressure on both leaders. For every action taken by Antony or Octavian could provoke public unrest, shift allegiances, or trigger conflict, and the dynamic interplay between popular opinion and elite maneuvering underscored the fragility of the Republic's social and political order, highlighting the degree to which human emotion, perception, and ambition could influence the course of history. Military loyalty became a central factor in the looming confrontation, as Antony's veteran legions provided him with immediate power and authority, while Octavian carefully courted provincial commanders and allied troops, emphasizing promises of reward, honor, and historical legitimacy to secure support. And the distribution of forces across the Republic created a complex web of strategic considerations in which timing, movement, and coordination were as critical as political rhetoric, public persuasion, or ideological justification, demonstrating that civil war in Rome was as much a contest of planning and perception as it was a struggle of arms. The Senate, meanwhile, attempted to maintain authority, mediate disputes, and manage public unrest. Yet, its influence was increasingly eclipsed by the personal power, charisma, and military control of Antony and Octavian, illustrating that the traditional institutions of the Republic had weakened under the pressures of assassination, civil unrest, and extraordinary leadership, and that survival in this environment depended on the ability to navigate both human psychology and structural limitations simultaneously. Both Antony and Octavian understood that controlling public perception was as vital as controlling legions, and they employed speeches, displays of wealth, honors to citizens, and symbolic acts to reinforce loyalty, cultivate legitimacy, and shape the historical narrative. For the memory of Caesar, the ideals of the Republic, and the moral justification for action were all intertwined with the practical necessities of power, and each misstep could be exploited by the other or misinterpreted by the populace, altering the balance of influence in ways that neither could fully predict. In the provinces, governors and military commanders observed these developments closely, weighing their allegiance to Antony, Octavian, or the Senate, and considering both personal advantage and long-term political survival, while the broader citizenry, veterans, and urban population absorbed news, rumors, and interpretation, creating a dynamic environment in which perception, loyalty, and fear dictated political and military outcomes, and where even small actions, such as the placement of a legion, a public address, or a symbolic gesture, could have cascading consequences across the Republic. Throughout this period, the memory of Caesar's life, reforms, and assassination continued to shape events, informing strategy, rhetoric, and alliances. And the shadow of his legacy influenced both Antony's and Octavian's decisions, reminding them that public sentiment, historical memory, and moral authority were inseparable from the practical exercise of power, and that the Republic's fragility meant that every choice carried profound ethical, political, and military consequences, highlighting the intertwining of personal ambition, historical legacy, institutional limitation, and human unpredictability as central forces shaping the course of events and pushing Rome toward the inevitable conflict that would define its transformation from republic to empire. As the power struggle between Antony and Octavian reached its climax, Rome found itself at the precipice of transformation, moving from the centuries-old republican system into the beginnings of imperial authority, and the city, once governed by collective debate, senatorial deliberation, and a balance of magistracies, now witnessed the consolidation of personal power in the hands of extraordinary individuals, whose ambition, strategic acumen, and mastery of public perception redefined the nature of political authority. As Octavian, carefully calculating each move, leveraged military strength, public sentiment, and the enduring legacy of Caesar to gradually assert dominance over both rivals and institutions, while Antony, driven by loyalty to Caesar's memory, personal ambition, and charisma, attempted to secure his position through both rhetoric and force, setting the stage for a confrontation that would determine not only the future of Rome's leadership, but also the very structure of the state, the laws that governed it, and the expectations of its citizens. In the streets and forums, the populace absorbed the unfolding drama with a mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation, interpreting speeches, public ceremonies, and displays of military power as signs of legitimacy, authority, and divine favor. And these reactions, though spontaneous, became critical factors in the calculations of leaders, demonstrating that, in Rome, political power was inseparable from public perception, loyalty, and symbolic action, and that the ability to shape opinion could rival even the influence of armies in determining historical outcomes. Senators, veterans, and provincial leaders observed the shifting balance carefully, weighing the advantages of alliance with Octavian or Antony, the risks of remaining neutral, and the potential consequences of action or inaction. And these considerations revealed the fragility of the Republic's traditional institutions, which, though historically resilient, could not contain the ambitions of men whose influence extended beyond law and procedure into the hearts, minds, and weapons of the Roman people, showing that the combination of strategy, perception, and military might had become decisive in shaping outcomes. Octavian's strategy, marked by patience, calculation, and the careful cultivation of loyalty, gradually allowed him to consolidate influence, control key provinces, and command allegiance from both military forces and civic leaders. While Antony's reliance on immediate power, popularity, and rhetorical skill created a temporary advantage, yet left him vulnerable to strategic maneuvers that exploited gaps in loyalty, perception, and coordination, highlighting the interplay of timing, foresight, and adaptability in political survival, and revealing that ultimate victory required both tactical brilliance and the ability to manipulate perception, memory, and emotion simultaneously. The psychological and social dimensions of this transition were equally significant, for citizens, soldiers, and political actors interpreted every speech, march, and public gesture as evidence of moral authority, legitimacy, and historical inevitability. And these interpretations, in turn, influenced action, creating a feedback loop in which human perception shaped reality as much as the decisions of leaders themselves, emphasizing that the transformation from republic to empire was as much a psychological and cultural phenomenon as it was a military and political one. Military loyalty, once rooted in service to the Senate or collective institutions, now became a decisive factor in consolidating authority, as legions whose allegiance had been cultivated by Caesar, Antony, or Octavian acted not only as instruments of force but also as symbols of legitimacy, and their support could validate political claims, intimidate rivals, and influence public perception, illustrating that power in this era was inseparable from the hearts, minds, and loyalty of those who carried weapons and represented the visible enforcement of authority. In the provinces, governors and regional commanders interpreted the developments in Rome carefully, aligning with Antony, Octavian, or neither, depending on a combination of strategic calculation, personal ambition, and loyalty to Caesar's legacy, while ordinary citizens observed and participated in shaping the unfolding narrative through rumor, discussion, and reaction, creating a multifaceted environment in which every gesture, every decision, and every shift in alliance could reverberate across the Republic. highlighting the interdependence of human action, perception, and historical outcome, and demonstrating that the fall of the Republic was not the result of a single act or individual, but the culmination of a complex interplay of ambition, institutional fragility, historical precedent, and the unpredictability of human behavior. As the conflict between Octavian and Antony continued to unfold, the political, military, and social dynamics of Rome evolved rapidly, and the assassination of Caesar, which had once seemed a decisive act in defense of the Republic, now became a catalyst for the emergence of a new political order, one in which personal authority, strategic mastery, and public perception determined the trajectory of history more than senatorial procedure, law, or tradition. And in this volatile environment, Octavian, with calculated patience and remarkable foresight, moved to consolidate power by securing the loyalty of the military, cultivating alliances among senators, and appealing to the citizenry through both rhetoric and symbolic gestures, creating a perception of inevitability that reinforced his claim to authority while gradually isolating Antony, whose immediate use of charisma, reputation, and military might initially gave him prominence, but ultimately exposed him to strategic vulnerabilities that Octavian skillfully exploited. Citizens of Rome, veterans, merchants, and provincial leaders all became active participants in shaping this transformation, their perceptions, allegiances, and reactions magnifying the influence of both Octavian and Antony. For public sentiment functioned as both a barometer and an accelerator of power, capable of legitimizing authority, inciting unrest, or catalyzing military action, and the ability to manipulate, appeal to, and interpret popular perception became as vital to political success as mastery of armies, territory, or legal prerogatives, highlighting the complex interplay of social psychology, communication, and strategic leadership in the late Republic. Antony, despite commanding loyal legions and enjoying strong personal influence among Caesar's veterans, found his position increasingly challenged as Octavian leveraged timing, messaging, and alliances to erode Antony's base of support, creating a multi-dimensional struggle in which military might, public persuasion, and moral legitimacy intersected, and each decision, speech, and movement had cascading consequences, capable of shifting allegiances, inspiring fear, or provoking rebellion, illustrating that the consolidation of power in this era required a simultaneous mastery of strategy, perception, and historical narrative, and that failure in any one domain could undermine all others. The Senate, though officially the governing institution of the Republic, struggled to assert meaningful authority as both Antony and Octavian increasingly dictated political outcomes through influence, military presence, and public engagement, revealing the weakening of republican structures under extraordinary circumstances, and emphasizing that the transformation from republic to empire was not solely a product of conquest or violence, but also of strategic foresight, psychological manipulation, and the ability to command loyalty through charisma, legitimacy, and historical continuity. In the provinces, governors and military commanders interpreted the evolving struggle carefully, aligning themselves with the leader they believed would prevail or offer the greatest advantage, demonstrating that political survival depended on an acute awareness of both immediate power dynamics and long-term historical trajectories, while ordinary citizens, observing speeches, ceremonies, and military parades, reinforced the legitimacy of whichever faction appeared strongest, creating a feedback loop in which perception, loyalty, and authority became mutually reinforcing, and shaping a new political reality in which Octavian's eventual supremacy appeared increasingly inevitable. The psychological dimension of this transformation cannot be understated. For the Roman people, veterans and elites were collectively interpreting historical events, moral justifications, and political legitimacy simultaneously, creating a complex matrix in which Octavian's careful manipulation of memory, loyalty, and perception allowed him to consolidate influence, while Antony's reliance on force and charisma, though formidable, became insufficient to secure dominance. And this interplay underscored the critical importance of foresight, patience, and narrative control in determining the outcome of political struggles in Rome. Military loyalty remained a decisive factor, as legions and commanders not only provided the capacity for action, but also conveyed legitimacy through their allegiance, creating a dual dynamic in which power was enforced materially through force and morally through perception. And Octavian's ability to navigate, cultivate, and coordinate this duality allowed him to systematically weaken Antony's position while building the foundation for a centralized, enduring authority that would mark the transition from a fragile republic to a structured imperial system. As Octavian consolidated his power following the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, the Roman Republic, which had endured for centuries as a system of shared authority among magistrates, senators, and assemblies, effectively ceased to function in its historical form, and the city of Rome, along with its citizens, soldiers, and provincial leaders, witnessed a transformation in which political authority became increasingly centralized, personality-driven, and reinforced by both military loyalty and the perception of legitimacy. For Octavian, later Augustus, skillfully combined strategic patience, moral authority, and public spectacle to establish an enduring system in which he held ultimate control while preserving the illusion of republican institutions, demonstrating a mastery of political, social, and psychological dynamics that few historical figures could rival. The streets of Rome, usually vibrant with commerce, civic interaction, and daily life, reflected the tension, anticipation, and subtle acceptance of this new order as citizens observed ceremonies, speeches, and public displays of military power that both reassured, and every gesture, parade, or symbolic act was interpreted as evidence of Octavian's legitimacy. His ability to maintain stability and his capacity to project continuity with Rome's storied past, a necessary foundation for the acceptance of a fundamentally altered political system. The Senate, though formally retained as a governing body, found its authority increasingly subordinate to Octavian's will, with debates, votes, and proclamations shaped as much by his influence, strategic messaging, and moral positioning as by law, procedure, or deliberation, illustrating that political power had shifted from collective governance to personal authority reinforced through perception, loyalty, and control of military and civic institutions, and highlighting the structural fragility of the Republic when confronted with extraordinary leadership and ambition. military loyalty, having played a critical role in the power struggles following Caesar's assassination, became an enduring pillar of Octavian's rule, as legions pledged allegiance to him personally rather than to the Senate or Republic. And this personal bond between general and soldiers, cultivated through reward, recognition, and strategic leadership, allowed Octavian to enforce his authority, manage potential rivals, and project stability across both Rome and the provinces, demonstrating that the foundation of empire rested not only on political acumen but also on careful stewardship of military power and morale. Public perception, propaganda, and historical narrative were equally crucial, for Octavian's skillfully shaped memory of the Republic, Caesar, and the preceding civil wars to present his consolidation of power as both morally justified and historically inevitable, blending appeals to tradition, civic virtue, and divine favor to legitimize his authority, mitigate dissent, and unify the citizenry. And in doing so, he established a model of leadership that would define the Roman Empire for centuries, demonstrating the inseparability of perception, persuasion, and power. Across the provinces, governors, military commanders, and local elites responded to Octavian's consolidation by aligning with the emerging imperial structure, seeking both security and opportunity in the stability promised by a single, overarching authority. And the collective acceptance of this new order by citizens, soldiers, and provincial leaders created a feedback loop in which legitimacy, authority, and stability reinforced one another, illustrating the complex interplay of personal ambition, structural transformation, and social perception that underpinned the transition from republic to empire. The psychological, social, and political transformation of Rome during this period reflected centuries of accumulated tension, ambition, and precedent. And Octavian's success revealed that the fall of the Republic was not merely the result of individual actions, military confrontations, or political maneuvering, but rather the outcome of a multi-dimensional process in which historical memory, human ambition, institutional fragility, and strategic perception intersected, culminating in the emergence of a system that preserved the semblance of republican tradition while establishing a durable imperial authority, a duality that would define Rome's governance, culture, and historical legacy for generations to come, and which continues to serve as a study in the complexities of power, leadership, and historical transformation.